Thank you. And so welcome everybody. We have, looks like a lot of citizen interest, so that's always a beautiful thing. And so if there are folks that are here to comment, I would invite you to come up. We do have a full agenda tonight, so please be succinct. We limit each segment to 3 minutes. So if anyone is here to speak tonight, please feel free at this time to, do we have a sign-up sheet or anything?
We don't have a sign-up sheet. No.
All right, well,
I'll go first.
thank you.
I don't think I'm in here. This isn't well polished, but.
Polish doesn't, just honesty is good.
Yeah, so I kind of did some research on the existing transportation master plan. Who are you? This is the
name and where.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's my fault.
No problem. Casey Gibson. I live in District 5.
Thanks, Casey. I know you've been here before.
We don't have 5 districts.
Oh, District 4 then.
District 5 is everything else in the whole state.
Yeah, I'm everywhere. So I started researching the transportation master plan, kind of understand what are we all trying to do. And it was kind of interesting. I couldn't really find, and I was talking to some other people that maybe it's supposed to be updated in 2026. But that was kind of hard to find that information. But I think it's an important thing to update maybe even sooner than 2026. It seemed like it's supposed to be kind of a living document with like frequent updates, but I couldn't find any updates in the last 5 years. And I'm particularly interested in protected bike lanes. And I noted in the action items, there's 14 miles of protected bike lanes that's called out in there. And I think right now we have 0, not to discount, there's like 4 miles of pilot projects coming. But I would just like to see some, I guess, renewed interest in updating the contents of it and some kind of renewed commitment from everyone, which I think is happening, but I think the more energy that's put into updating it and kind of revisiting it after 5 years, the more willingness to commit to, like, could we see, 20 miles of protected bike lanes in 2 years instead of, the next time we update it. So just kind of a curious citizen and still trying to understand how the government works and how to be influential and use my influence to have you influence. So I think that's all I gotta say.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, just tell us your name and.
My name is Robin Bernstein. I live at Littleton Crossing, and I got this book from the library. He calls the car the devil wagon because it has killed more animals, humans, and cities. So anyway, I haven't had a devil car for 24 years. I've been walking and taking RTD and light rail. So I researched it. Speed is #1 in fatal crashes. So safer streets for pedestrians, bikes, safety first in your design of streets for everybody. Okay, I was on Mary Carter Greenway the other day. I don't have a car. I was going to VCA Animal Hospital. And please rename it. It's not a trail. A trail is a beaten path. This is a dangerous, ruthless, perilous path where the ruthless driver of their e-bike, it has no consideration for the walker, none. I walk on the dirt, and even that's perilous because you have to jump over boulders and sink down, and but I made it. And I tell the driver, slow down. That's another thing. You know, I was hit by coming back from Court Power on 2020 walking, and a bike hit me. She slammed into me and I got a broken knee. So you know, she didn't say anything. That's the new reality on these bike trails. So, you know, instead of saying, excuse me, you know, or what I have, you know, they should say loudly, on your left. Because I don't hear it. They don't have to be afraid. And also ring a loud bell. Because, you know, I would say on your left, you forgot to say it, and they would look at me like, but you know, they don't care, the biker. And I haven't been on that trail because I've been walking down Littleton, taking the bus. So anyway, one more thing, the e-bikes need to slow down, actually stay off that trail. So, you know, just, you know, for your vision zero, ride the zero. That's a good idea. It goes up to Union Station. Then you'll get out of your comfort zone of the car and learn, understand what it's like to walk, see the trash, see the homeless, see the schlepping and the misery. And, you know, because it's not easy jumping over stuff. And, you know, when you're getting off the bus, that's also icebergs and ice. Thank God I've done yoga for 20 years. So, you know, I can, and I also, before I get off on the road, I visualize that the road goes my way. So the driver, there's a way to do it when you're walking. But it's very dangerous. And I'm just letting you know, as a pedestrian, I haven't had a car for 24 years. I don't want it. But thank
Thanks,
you.
Robin.
Thank you.
Anybody else wanna? Okay, Pam, you wanna jump up there?
Ma'am.
We got a couple. Go ahead, and if you would, let everybody know, introduce yourself.
My name is Pam Chapor, and I live a block and a half from here in District 1. Specific comments about the agenda before the rationale, which I won't be able to finish. For the field trip, I'm going to remind you of the value to the city of the Highline Canal crossing at Kaylee, which is beyond a path. It is the view, it is almost an unmatched view of Denver, and it demonstrates what the Highline Canal did, transported water without energy by gravity, and it's a great view. We, the city, have a value from that, and it's also historic. The historic story of Littleton is the expansion of agriculture, first by the city ditch, but the Highline Canal really expanded Littleton, and that's when Denver extended their Broadway up to us. It is an important site, and so when the field trip occurs, please think about that crossing as more than transportation, which, next point, is always more than transportation. It's always more than transportation. Land use code, transportation, and economic financial results are tied. Have you ever gotten a product from the city that explains all three in their relatedness? No. I've watched them all. I've been at more meetings than everybody here probably. And I'm gonna tell you, it's not there. It hasn't been there for the last 3 city managers. This is a failure by the city, which we as citizens, we live here. We must demand that be fixed. So the land use code, which was alluded to, needs major revision, and the transportation master plan. They need to be integrated, and they need major revision because there's huge numbers of changes going on right now. And they don't agree with the envision. Fiber optics communication master plan. I have a couple concerns: privacy and security from attack or sabotage. And if there's an outage, what is the emergency backup? Please ask these questions. No criticism on the package. It's something that, you know, is the next step that needs to be there. Third mineral in Santa Fe, where are the design drivers? I don't see the entire city map connecting how this fits into the rest of our transportation network and in and out of the city. I don't see any projected numbers by time milestones of all travel modalities for the whole thing. Well, that's part of basic planning. We don't have it. In the school zone council meeting, boy, that was a lot of time to talk about a very specific thing. And again, I'm going to go back to the need for an integrated city plan with transportation and finances and land uses all integrated. They're totally relatable. They're able to be estimated and modeled Why don't we have urban design on staff? We're hiring economic development. We need urban planning and design on staff. 3 city managers have not done that. We desperately need it now. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Pam. Next.
Hi, my name is Tam Sincere. I live on South Spotswood Street. This is a little off the cuff since I didn't really plan on things, but here we are. So a little background on myself. I am professionally a proposal writer. And I've worked for engineering firms, and currently I work for a school transportation firm that specializes in small vehicle transportation. So this feels very personal to me, both on a professional and on a personal level. I use my bike a lot. I do ride an e-bike. I do have a very loud bell, and I do yell at people because it's very annoying when people try to run you down on the trails. One of my biggest pet peeves, and I also yell at them. So everybody who rides a bike should yell at other bikers who don't call out, FYI. I, thanks Kenna, am responsible for the Lake and Stern Parkway crossing that was piloted this summer. I have nothing but rave reviews to say. I use it multiple times a week, and I am happy to say that cars are still turning too tightly and hitting all of the boulders that have been put in. So, I mean, it's a good mechanism, and I'm glad that the city has piloted it and chosen to use that as a measure for safety. As a part of that, and as we're thinking about safer routes to school, living right at Stern Parkway and Lake Avenue, Stern Parkway is a safe route to school. One of the things that isn't currently on a lot of these routes are perhaps continuous sidewalks or bike lanes. And I would hope to encourage you all that perfect should not be the enemy of best or like good. I also bike commute to my office in Greenwood Village. I take the dangerous road down Orchard 2 to 3 times a week. And as a result, like I've realized it's not really worth my life riding my bike. And so I am illegally riding it on the very nice wide park, sidewalks. But as I've been thinking a lot about modality and things like that, I'm sure that you all know, the wider the street, the faster the driver, right? I see it personally. I live right at Lake and Stern Parkway and Spotswood. The roads are way too wide. People literally fly down Lake Avenue, a residential street, at like 45 to 50 miles an hour all day long. Like it is ridiculous. And so if we can think about ways to narrow the road, make room for more bikes and wider sidewalks, that is what I would love to see as a part of this plan.
Hanson, thank you. One more. Come on up.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Benjamin Chiquer. I live at 8417 South Reed Street. I'm here to urge this board to advocate for the immediate revision of the Transportation Master Plan. It's woefully out of date, both in terms of its regular update schedule and its content. For far too long, the city has been willing to optimize convenience for motorists at the expense of safety for all road users, including motorists. We try to limit the danger to pedestrians and bikers, but all the while we are still trying to optimize for cars. Recently, we have made steps that raise what we consider the minimum level of safety, and that's great, but we're still only doing the minimum. We need to flip the script. We need a master plan that prioritizes safety and convenience of people walking and biking. It needs to be prioritized first, and motorist convenience can be limited instead of the other way around, where we optimize for faster cars and just say, well, let's set a number of pedestrian deaths that we find acceptable. Let's say we optimize for the most convenience and safety for pedestrians and say, well, let's make sure that cars can still get around to some degree. We need policy and engineering documents to achieve this goal. It's not gonna just happen. If it was gonna just happen, it would have just happened. So we need policy and engineering documents to achieve this. So we start by updating the transportation master plan as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Appreciate that. A lot of great ideas and some I think we're busily working on, I would say. And all we need is about $100 million, I think, to be able to do all of that. But thank you for coming up and talking about those things. I think there are things we talk about every month that we get together. And I've seen some of the same things that you've talked about. I've been nearly run over twice in the last month by e-bikes that were on the sidewalks. So I think as we look for ways to encourage biking, we've got to make sure we don't do it at the expense of pedestrians and cars. And some people still do need to get around in cars and trucks, and 98% of us do that. So we're trying to balance those things, but we're sensitive to the input, and I think you'll see that that's a lot of the focus that we have done on this board over the last couple of years. The last thing I would say is that there's not a cause and effect between the TMB and making changes. While I think it's extremely important that we do that, and I'm not personally in charge of that, I don't have anything more than a citizens advisory role in any of this. But updating the TMB isn't, or the TMP rather, isn't necessarily going to translate into achieving all of the things that are laid out in there. So I'm in agreement that we would like to get that updated. And I think that there are some sections in there that are out of date. But that's got to come hand in hand with the funding to make all of that happen. So those are things that I think we need to follow both here and at council, because those things need to work together, or they simply look like lofty goals that never get achieved. So I appreciate everybody's passion and fire to get that done, because I think that's important to move it forward. But I think those two things together are going to be essential to make it happen. And I think that the last thing I would say before we get into the discussion topics for tonight, I did summarize some of the things that we've done over this board has done over the last few months, and sent a little memo, just a one pager onto council. But in many ways, I felt a little anticlimactic, because we had just had a chance to go to council and have that presentation to them. So I think you'll see in that we highlighted a lot of important things, and I tried to summarize those. And so that was sent out, and thanks to the staff for forwarding that on, I think last week. But that's all that I had, and I think with that, I'm ready to move us into the field trip location discussion as our next topic, and I think we're all set to do that. You know, we jumped right past taking roll, which I forgot about. I think we're all here except for Michael Gloden, and Michael was sick tonight and couldn't make it. But yeah, anybody else, if you're not here, please speak up.
Test your absence now.
Would that be good enough to just cut to that? And
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking at the list and everybody's here except for Mike.
hey, good deal. Yeah. All right. Hopping into the field trip, saw the list in there, and we had some discussion on that. The comment about the crossing there at where the canal comes across Broadway. I'd like to pay attention to some of those things. And
Yeah, and I'll just say, anyway, kind of came up with this list. You kind of, in years past on this field trip, we focused on kind of our big projects, right? Like our Santa Fe and minerals, things like that. Because there is such an emphasis in the last year on the internal roadway network and bike and pedestrian stuff like that. You'll see that's reflected in here with like the Highland Canal crossing and the Elati Street. So that's something we're going to do a corridor study on. So again, this is a draft list. You know, you guys can change this, pick it apart, switch it around, whatever you like, but it'd be better to come to you with a list and let you guys react.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, I'm anxious to see some of the pilot projects. You know, we heard some of the citizen comments about some of the bulb outs that still get run over and some things like that. But we're seeing a lot of that, happen, and I think that's great. And we ought to take a look at some of those and just see, maybe you can, give us some real-time observations on, hey, here's what's working. This looks like it makes sense to go permanent. This we're gonna tinker with a little bit to improve it. But I think that would be great, Ken, if we could, or whomever gets to update that.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I can explain a little bit about each, and then obviously if you have questions about any of these locations or you want to add any locations, if that works, since there's not really a description. In the final, we'll do a handout like we did last year with some more information on each location. So project downtown, so we'd stop downtown. Obviously, we have not started construction on that. And that plan will actually be adopted, by council until November, but we can, have some of the images that our team has developed and show the preferred alternative. So it would be more, use our imaginations of what downtown could look like.
Imagine trees.
You have to bring up the tree.
Oh, I know. So-
That was hurtful.
Buy a Christmas tree.
Oh, they're gonna buy them. Did you read that? Yeah, yeah, I like that.
We will have trees and then, yeah, once it's reconstructed. So that's what we were thinking about Project Downtown, just stopping on Main Street and kind of talking about the different improvements as part of that vision plan. The community trail connection at the War Memorial Rose Garden. So this is an Arapahoe County open space grant that we are awarded this year. And so that will be doing design of a trail connection. Right now, it's a dirt maintenance path between the community trail, and then it would be formalizing that trail connection and then adding a new crossing across Bemis into Stern Parkway. Lake Avenue and Stern Parkway /
What
spots.
kind of crossing, Ken? Is it just like a striped crossing?
Yeah, I forget. This was this project came out of our trail connectivity study. I don't believe we had an RRFB there, but as part of the design, we look at the warrants if it is warranted to upgrade that crossing to something more signalized.
And that's a data-driven decision. If you have enough volume, we're able to get one of those flashers, and those are a little pricier, aren't they, than,
15 to 20,000.
how much?
15 to 20,000.
Pocket change for
Like where you
guys,
hit the
but-
button.
Yeah, and flashing lights.
Yeah, those are great, but.
As opposed to a couple
Yeah,
of
that's
$100.
probably not gonna get that volume in that location.
And you said the design has yet to be done. I'm just thinking, because that Stern Park trail is only jive with where that service road is. Like the ramp the handicap ramp and access into Stern Park is about 20 yards up from.
I think
service road.
we'll probably talk about that at the
I
field
did-
trip we're looking at as part of the.
So the design hasn't been done.
No, this grant is to do the design. Yeah. So again, imagination when we're in the field.
Nice.
So Lake Avenue and Stern / Spotswood, this is one of our pilot project locations. Spotswood and Lake actually should be installed this week or next week. We're adding on to that pilot project. So it's just looking at one of those pilot locations, see how it's working, walk the site.
Yep, just heard comments on that street tonight. So, yeah.
And then Alati Street. So we have a lot going on Alati right now. So we figured that we could kind of do a whole corridor
Yeah.
look at it. So this would include our upcoming Alati Street corridor study, talk about some of the improvements that we're wanting to look at as part of that study and some ideas for that. Euclid Avenue reconstruction, we'll be reconstructing Euclid Avenue between Alati and Broadway next summer. And so we could talk about the design there.
Are we thinking about going all the way from Euclid up to Runyon? Or just the section down by Euclid
So on
on Saturday, or on the Saturday, the 4th?
Oh, yeah, I think we're gonna plan on hitting the whole corridor.
Yeah, I think we would probably be in talk about these things while we're in the bus too,
Okay.
to talk about it.
All right, great.
Yeah, and then we'll have some pilot projects that will
Oh, yeah. I
potentially
see.
be installed by that
Yeah.
point. And then our pilot project at the church.
Okay, yeah.
So that's all of Alati, and then we last year, I know we talked about the 3 crossings of the Highland Canal on Broadway. This year, we were thinking of focusing specifically on the one at Arapahoe Road. Since we do have some TIP funding to do an underpass design project with Arapahoe County there. And then we could also talk about the at-grade improvements that came out of the Littleton linkages study.
You say we have TIF funding for that. Does that mean that we have it to do the study or to do the actual project?
The TIP funding for the underpass is to do the actual design. We do not have construction money.
I was very excited when you said that. I did not know this, but okay. That is exciting.
First step towards.
There's a whole backstory there that I won't go into right now. I'm happy to tell you later. Yeah, so just design funding at this point.
How's that funding coming for the underpass that's gonna go under Broadway at Lee Gulch? Cause I was driving home last night and I saw a deer out in the middle of the road, looking like, which way do I go? And so me and that deer would love to see that, so.
Did you tell the deer there's no deer crossing sign there, so he should miss?
I honked at that deer and hazed it and said, get off of Broadway. Momentarily.
And then we have been to the Santa Fe and Mineral area before, but because there's so much work going on around there, we figured it's, not a bad idea to go around there, and we can talk about, we'll hear a more in-depth description of all the work going on there later tonight, with our presentation, so. Yeah, this is our draft list. As we said, we're open to changing anything, adding locations, if there's anything specific you wanna see, if there's something you're not really interested in. Yeah.
We'll probably chat about this, but I don't see it enumerated in number 4, but specifically the traffic calming circles. I think those could be good to chat about.
Yeah.
I bet we will.
Yeah, we can definitely put that on the list to chat about. Yeah.
Right.
I think we kind of figured that would be under the whole Elati Street corridor study, since we'll be looking at the whole corridor, but yeah, we'll make a note to discuss that. Yeah, and the pilots, that's true.
My only thought is, that's a lot to cover in 2 hours. It's like, if we do the math, it's like 20 minutes per stop, and then, so if you put 5-minute drive time between, it's still 15. I just wanna make sure staff, whoever staff is coming, is gonna have time beyond 12. Like, like whoever's doing the driving, whoever's doing the tour guiding. I think this is a great list, and I'd like to go through it, but I'd like to make sure we have time to hit everything appropriately.
Yeah, in some of these we can drive through, like, Project Downtown, like I think probably the graphics show a little bit more than what's on the ground there now, so we could, drive down Main Street as we discuss it. So there's some we can drive through, others we obviously can stop at and talk about, so. Yeah, and we don't strictly have to stick to the 12 p.m., but we do, because it is a public meeting, so we kind of need to have an agenda there, so. And given the popularity of tonight's meeting, I'll probably ask people to RSVP so we can plan ahead. I'll get that changed on the website, but that way if we have 10 members of the public planning on coming, we can plan on maybe another vehicle or something, so, or if people are fine following their cars.
Thanks.
Or bikes.
Okay, cool.
We could omit the project downtown, I mean, if that really is, if it's graphics to look at, more, could almost do it in one of our meetings. Just if we're looking for.
I don't know, there's a lot to be.
Yeah, if we're looking for a time saving.
Yeah, that's fine. And, the next stakeholder working group is coming up. And so I think that is something we'll be discussing with this group anyways. So if you are all fine with that, I think there's nothing on the ground.
Right. So
Okay.
I feel like we probably all have some relative familiarity with what's in downtown.
We're all going to Denver Brewing after this meeting anyway, so.
You all don't want to go to the craft fair and table for another project with me?
Speaking of the craft fair, I am double booked working the craft fair, so I will be late to the field trip.
All right. Just as long as you know where it ends.
Text us, we'll tell you where we are.
I will. I have to direct traffic at the craft fair, so.
Yeah.
It's the old elected official working the public thing.
And one other question is, we chatted last year at our trip about the Broadway Mineral intersection. And I think that that feels like an especially on an island, location from a pedestrian and bike, facility perspective. It's not in here, but and we don't have to spend time on it now, but I think it'd be good to get an update on that at some point about what the timeline is for that. Yeah, just as a aside, yeah.
Absolutely.
But not Broadway and Littleton, only Broadway and Broadway and Littleton Boulevard.
I'd love to hear about Broadway.
They're both part of the same project.
Yeah, oh, I didn't know that, yeah, right.
It's always and.
On
Always
the,
and.
on the Broadway and Littleton, are you guys collaborating with the South Metro Housing Authority? They own that building there, and I think it's gonna be a different use in the next 5 years.
Yeah, we've seen a preliminary plan of what is anticipated there, but yeah.
Which building?
They own the Wells Fargo building,
Oh,
the
the
building
just
with the
north
Wells.
of Arby's. and
Yeah,
everything.
with the
Yeah,
Wells Fargo. They own the Arby's and they're,
just north of the Arby's.
yeah.
That'd be a good like stakeholder. interview. We can definitely update you all on that project in the future. Right now, there's not really much to update on, but we will definitely keep you informed as that progresses, because it will start ramping up very soon.
I know you were kind of joking about the bike. I don't actually know who said the comment about riding bikes. But if we wanted to do like part of this, like if there was a group that wants to ride from little here to destination, you know, we can lead a group bike ride and that itself,
Definitely not get through this in 2 hours then.
Yeah.
depending on the destination.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, Emily, that might be something we do at a different time. Cause I would love that, to get us out on bikes, get my life insurance updated, but, to ride with.
Carrier,
yeah.
someone has to child carry it, that's all. We had big-
The TMB bike ride would be great. And quite frankly, because of life insurance, I'm worth more to my wife dead than alive. So
That's what she said.
that's what she said. That bike.
Mind you of every morning.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, Emily. I think if we, not necessarily for this one, I'm open to any time, but I think that there's very few ways that are more effective to get people thinking about bike safety than being on one of those roads on a bike. So,
That's a great point.
so, yes.
Great point. Okay, well, I think that's good. I think we got a little feedback and we can check that one off and let's move forward then to the next item on the discussion, which are the holiday date changes. And that should be pretty straightforward. We can't meet on our normal Thursday in November because it's Thanksgiving Day. And the next one is between Christmas and New Year's. So how about what did we settle on? Was it?
Yeah, typically we just move it up to the third Thursday for those 2 months.
Yes.
And
Okay.
looking at, let me look at the city calendar here.
21st and the 19th.
Yeah. So there is on the 21st is the Tri-Cities homelessness meeting. That is in the council chamber, so we'll probably have to find a new location, but we could use the service center because we don't want to be right next door.
Yep.
It's a little crazy.
Okay.
And then in December, that would be the 19th, unless you guys want to meet the day after Christmas.
No.
Okay, so yeah, the 19th, there's nothing currently on the city calendar, so we can meet here on the 19th, so we'll work on updating locations for the November meeting.
Fantastic.
I will probably miss the meeting on the 21st in November. I gotta go.
Understandable.
When is Thanksgiving? Is it the
28th.
week? Oh, okay, sorry, yeah, if you said that already.
Also my birthday, everyone.
And my,
I might want to send that out to make sure that nobody misses.
December 17th is my 28th.
28th.
All right.
So just to make clear, we said November 21st and December 19th?
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll get those updated in the city calendar, as well as the invites that are already in your city of Littleton.
All right. So with that, can we move into the school zone evaluation? I know some of us were able to be there. Matt, I saw you via camera, and Jeff, I saw you, and there were other lurkers. Yeah, like me, watching it on the Channel 8, which is actually a pretty painless way to watch city council. No offense, Robert.
No, you can drink while you're watching. Every time Robert talks too long, drink.
No, and I'm not going there.
Consistency bingo.
Yes.
But I was
He was warned that was coming. Or
I
should.
was a lot more comfortable than I'm sure than anybody, because I had a good spot on the couch. But the broadcast actually was really good, and it allowed us to see certainly the presentation, and not as good as being there, and I appreciate the effort that some people made to be there, so. But for those that weren't, I guess we're gonna get into some of the details, but we're not gonna go through the whole thing again, are we? What's the, what do you think is the right way to communicate some of the high points and talk about what we want to pass forward?
Yeah, so I'll pass it off to Aaron and Tim, but yes, we did not include the presentation that was in the council packet, in the packet tonight. So the idea was for it to be a debrief. So hopefully everybody had a chance to watch it. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, we can start off with that. But I know there were some reactions. So we have Tim and Aaron here, as well as the other, we worked on it as well, but they were kind of leading it. And so, yeah, discuss it, questions.
Yeah.
You might have, so.
Well, how did you guys feel like it went?
Yeah, who wants to start?
Let's see, what's the right word? It was not interesting. It's not the word I want to use. It was, there were some questions that we probably didn't.
Oh, okay. So what were the ones that you think were this? I swear I talked to people about consistency, so obviously that didn't.
I mean, overall, I think we thought that it went well. Okay.
Yeah.
There were some questions that we just weren't probably ready for or expecting at that time. Usually, I know it was a general information piece, but usually we send it out early so that you guys can ask questions and whatever. So we didn't really get any questions until that night. So
That's true.
that was part of it.
I think we could have done a better job of starting out by, I know we talked about how it fits within Safer Streets Littleton, but making it clear what the focus of that evaluation was and what the scope was for Y2K, because I don't think that came across very clearly to a lot of residents and stuff. So probably in the future would start with that to make it clear what the objectives and goals of that project were to make sure everyone's clear. Because it is just one piece of the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish with Safer Streets Littleton. It was just the focus on school zones, not getting to schools and from schools, which I know was a perspective that a lot of people had. That's going to be come across in the corridor studies and traffic calming evaluation and stuff we're doing. But otherwise, I like the attention City Council gave it. I'm certainly on top of it and interested in it and wanting to learn more. I mean, that's a good sign in my opinion. You guys are all engaged.
When did the consultant?
April. Yeah. So I mean, basically in April to August type of effort. Probably if we, we're just doing it in no time frames, it'd be something that probably would have taken about twice as long. So they did a good job of getting stuff done as quickly as possible, what they did, but I think the part that was probably rushed a little bit was all the observations and stuff, right? Because we only had April and May to go and observe all 12 schools and make recommendations on that. So, but I think a big key to that was the follow-up that Tim and Ray, who was the project manager from Y2K, going and meeting individually with each school, each principal and their staff to really get a sense of what they're experiencing and what they're looking for as far as help. So that was probably even more helpful than the observations, in my opinion. They see it every day. They're out there working those crossings and stuff to make sure everyone stays as safe as possible.
I was a little surprised, Erin, in just watching it, that she was not ready for what I thought was an obvious question about the how far those signs should be from the crossing and what the specs actually said. because I had heard that that was gonna be the bone of contention and the reason that there was so much of a community uproar in advance. And I would have thought that she'd have had that buttoned down a little tighter before getting exposed to those questions in front of council. So I felt for you guys having to sit there and try to help with that, but she didn't seem to be prepared for that, which I thought was an obvious question.
Yes and no. I mean, that line that the mayor took out of the MUTCD is in a very specific section. And it is just a guidance. And, you know, all that we had been focusing on was explaining how we got to what we did, not what we didn't do type of thing. And I think we're prepared to talk about why we moved that particular flasher that was so far away, but not get into the details of specific distances. You know, she put together that whole kind of hypothetical situation, and it almost would have been easier, I think, reflecting in background, just to go take an example of one of the schools.
I think you're right.
Totally.
Because then people could have everyone would understand, okay, you're talking about this street, you're talking about that street.
Yeah, that was a blind alley also.
But again, that's what happens when we try and put some of these presentations together fairly quickly. So there's a lot of coordination that goes into them.
I know.
People don't see behind the scenes.
I get that.
And we're getting a lot of direction from a lot of different people on what should and shouldn't be included in those presentations.
I agree with your reflection that probably could have, should have done a better job of clarifying that the big project, this is one little tiny part of what we're doing in the scope of things. We're focused on this. I think my sense walking away where I felt like the friction was you were talking about school zones, how to make in front of a school building as safe as possible. And the community is very concerned about the kid leaving the door all the way to the school. And so it's, you know, you were focused on the last 100 yards and everybody's is now concerned about what happens between my front door and that last 100 yards, which can be a block or a mile or two. And so I think, and I don't know if it's too late, but I think some sort of communication around like how we're gonna deal with that buffer zone. Right? Like the way I think about I can't remember, I think it was you. Someone brought up the whole idea of saying like, the way I picture a school zone is you put a dot in the middle of the school and you go out 100 yards or 200 yards or some number, and that's the school zone, which by the way, probably should have just said, yeah, that's mostly right. There's some tweaks here and there, but basically that's right. You're thinking about the right way. And then, so if we go out the next 100 yards or whatever the number is to, you know, from 100 yards from that center dot to a mile from that center dot, we need to have all of us need to have some ideas and plans on how are we gonna keep all of our kids safe in that buffer zone as well.
Yeah, and the tough part about that is when you take our city and you draw a mile around each school, that is the entire city. You have just said, streets in the city should be made safe for kids.
I love where you're going with this. I love where you're going.
I'm not sure you got sympathy for your problem there.
The budget is the problem with that.
I'm glad we see eye to eye. Oh, but look at the consistency.
So, and that's where I think, again, we probably should have done a better job of how this fits in. We applied for this big federal grant that we're still waiting to hear from, and those 9 corridors are most of our major school corridors. And so those corridor studies will address that problem of looking at the network holistically of how to make it safer across an entire corridor. So that, you know, once you get to that corridor, obviously, we're not looking at every street in the city, but you know, once you get to a Berry Avenue, how can you safely, you know, use Berry Avenue to get to Goddard or to Centennial? So.
Yeah, and I think it's a big step that we haven't been able to do in the past, right? I mean, the transportation master plans come up several times tonight. I mean, what I think a lot of people are forgetting is we didn't have that for the first 125 years of being a city. So yeah, it's a little rough, the first one. You've got to put something down on paper so you have somewhere to start from, right? And I think we'd all agree that an update is very appropriate because look what's changed since 2019, right? We went through a pandemic. We've had a complete changeover in a lot of our perspectives on how we get around and deal with the roads in the city. And we do want to reflect that. But that's the overarching document, right? And what we're trying to focus on now is how do we take those steps down and start focusing in? I think we actually take a different approach than what you were just doing, Jeff. You're talking about starting really close in and working out, right? And what we tend to do is start really big and start focusing in more and more. And, you know, I think the school zone evaluation was unique from that standpoint. It was a point of opportunity, as we saw it, to kind of focus in on our schools for a little bit, because we're still at the big picture and we're trying to get down there, but it takes some time. So let's skip a little bit and focus on some of our key areas around the city, obviously around kids, and keeping them the most vulnerable users of our roadway as safe as possible. So we're kind of doing it twofold, right? We're starting big and working our way in, and we're starting in here really small and trying to work out and see how they all mesh together. But I think that one project, if we can get it, is really key to making all of this come together, because we can look at a corridor at a time, but that doesn't tie a whole network together. That's the problem. So if we're able to look at all these corridors at one time, that's huge for us, because now we can do an evaluation where not only are we looking at a corridor, but how is it going to interact with this corridor and that corridor, and how do they all tie together? And how do you now get, and I think it was it you, Tom, that talked about at the joint meeting with city council, how do I get from my house downtown?
Yeah.
And how do I find those paths and stuff? And that's what looking at all these corridors, like Ken said, will allow us to do. But again, it's just a study at that point too. It still comes back to, as Matt was saying, funding, right? Ultimately, to actually implement a lot of that. And that's why we're doing so many of these pilot projects, because we can do stuff fairly, not cheap, but fairly under a budget to get stuff in quicker and evaluated. Whereas doing those bigger projects of actually putting in protected bike lanes and stuff cost millions of dollars. So we're trying to combine, we've heard a lot of things tonight about, don't let perfection be in the way of doing anything, right? But at the same time, we get a lot of pushback if we do something and it's not enough. Why didn't you do more? Yeah. So yeah, it is quite a balance, and it's hard to, where do you start? Well, we start where the opportunities are first. And that's with other ongoing projects and stuff, because it's easier to add something to another project that's ongoing than to create a brand new. So I think what we're gonna see in the city in the next year to 5 years is a lot of change that everyone's been waiting for and looking for a long time. Getting those actual protected bike lanes, cycle tracks and stuff on the ground and operational.
Yeah, I love the pilots because it does give you a chance to get something a little low budget in, let people get the feel for it, see how they think it's working, and then make the tweaks before it becomes permanent and you have to make that full investment. And so I don't know, for my money, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'm hoping that we see some of that on our bike tour.
Yeah, like along those lines, if you can contrast to like real world projects where in Emeryville in California, they were gonna get some benches for buses. And they talked about it, and then the next week they put like 20 up or something, I can't remember what it was. And the citizens were like, where was the public comment? And the mayor was like, we can spend $200,000 getting a study, we can do all these things, or we can just put up some bike benches. That does not have to be this incredibly long, laborious process. Then you have LA, who did a similar project with a shade structure, if you all saw that. It was made the news. It was like a $20,000 shade structure that provided almost no shade. And it took like 2 years, and there's a balance there of like, do you make it best? Do you make it good? If you make it good, then people are saying, why is there a big gap? This isn't very good. So that it's challenging, I think, to figure out the line, of where to walk there. But I think the pilot projects are fantastic because we can't, like, people know those are not permanent. And hopefully they're not permanent. Hopefully we get funding and we can make them not permanent. But we can try them out, see how it works, get insight, and then finalize some things and get funding. So the pilot projects are great, I think.
Yeah, I would say that hypothetical really didn't help you guys out at all. And, I would really think hard about how to put examples out, because that really, I know it just, that it totally took us off to the side, on the side.
And someone said, what is going to be safer as a result of that meeting, like, of that study? I'm not saying this like as a critique, but I would not be able to point to a thing and say, we're going to get this thing in this spot, you know?
Ironically, consistency, I think, is what we could get out of it.
Yeah, so like, yeah, I mean, that is one, but you know, just like, it was hard to pick, you know, just say like, this is gonna get better. I know there's a lot of steps to things, but yeah.
Have you guys been asked by LPS to help them do their other schools? Less than half of LPS's students live in Littleton.
Yeah, when we first started our Safe Routes to School project that Shane and Kenna have been working on, well now Emily too, with all the signs that you see on our routes to school, we reached out to Centennial to try and do a joint program with them. They weren't in a place at that time to take that on. So it was a little challenging when we first started working on that part of it with LPS, because some of the school routes are partly in Littleton and partly in Centennial.
Yeah.
Or other agencies, and so, yeah, but our focus, what we
Oh, absolutely.
put our money towards is the schools in the city boundaries. So.
Absolutely, but I mean, I guess I would expect some advocacy for Centennial to do something similar, and I just, you know, I want to support Centennial, but I don't want to spend our money on Centennial, so.
And that's something we can add. I mean, there's some we need to update in Littleton, and that's, you know, we can kind of, we're gonna do that internally, but we talk with Centennial all the time. I think at the time we applied for this, they were not in the place to do it. I know they have different staffing now. So, you know, that's something that we can mention and see if we can make the connection of Centennial and LPS, you know, work it out, so.
So Phillips Avenue is a great street that you could work on because it's both Centennial and Littleton and my neighborhood as well.
We'll be getting a protected bike lane
I'm excited about
at
that.
some point this year.
And also down Clarkson, which is completely out of Littleton, but they put in a flasher. You guys have the letters and I can't spit them out right now.
Yeah, that doesn't serve you well either.
But they put one of those in. So there's some money there, Robert, to your point. They're beginning to invest in upgraded crossings and they did an amazing striping job down Clarkson. I know the paint doesn't protect bikes, but it certainly raises awareness more than that supposed bike ride ever did before.
Hopefully that's the first step.
Awareness, that's right.
Progress to a protected bike lane eventually.
There you go, right. Actually, then we'll get the milk jugs filled with sand and put those every few feet.
Symbolic.
You're supposed to go with the plungers.
So, and this is the one that we applied for, right? And so we would be having one large sum of funds to go and study all of these collectively at the same time. And I think we've heard comments tonight of having a plan that is comprehensive for Littleton. So this seems like it could really help and go a long way for that, and for multiple modes of transportation as well.
Yeah, and so these corridor studies will go down to the next level of details, like the TMP says, right, like this should be a bike route, this should be a pedestrian route. It doesn't make recommendations like, hey, the sidewalk should be 7 feet and the bike lane should be 7 feet, right? That's what these corridor studies will get down to. And then they'll go to the next level, which is, we're drafting the scope of work for an RFQ for Lottie. And what we want to do is identify in that scope of work, like, hey, we don't want to just stop and study, but we want to identify locations for 30% design, and then also come up with concepts for quick build. So after the corridor study is done, we can, be, buying the C curve and the delineators, as that study's finishing up, and then go put it in the ground, after it's done. So there's something quick, and then we're setting the stage for the future to go get future dollars to actually construct the design that we come up with, so.
Yeah. When do we hear back about this?
The federal government did not. I think we're expecting it to happen before the election, but at this point, I have no idea. Our next.
It's going to be continuing resolution, isn't it? So that wouldn't be new money, would it?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So we're kind of just in a waiting game right now to hear back. Another federal grant program is called the RAISE program. That typically comes out in January, February timeframe. And so that's kind of another opportunity. If we're unsuccessful with this ATIP application, we could go after a RAISE grant.
Somebody asked me, how do we pay for all the blue signs? Was that the Safe to Schools grant?
Yeah, that was a grant.
That's what I thought.
So, and it was a tip set aside for school routes, but it was not a Safe Routes to School grant.
No, that's fine, but, and there are a couple that I think are wrong.
Yeah, so we had a deadline to get all. Yes, there was a deadline to get all of our funding spent by the end of July and have the contractor install those before we lost the funding. So we went and we got it all spent, and now we're gonna go back and we're collecting those areas that need to be revised and having the contractor come back and fix them all at once. So, yeah.
And then we are aware that only 8 schools were installed. And so we are going to throughout this next year, work with the other schools to get safe routes to defined and then signs installed for those as well.
I didn't notice that.
You're obviously not driving every road.
I'm still trying to figure out where Phillips is, quite frankly. 'Cause I don't know where it is.
Powell Middle School.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that help. Thanks for that assist.
Yeah, so the school signs that were not installed were for charter schools and St. Mary's Catholic School.
I appreciate that St. Mary's was included in the study.
Yeah.
Really
That's
valuable.
important.
Yeah, I think we would like to create a school route for them as well.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
Question I would have is, looking at some of the big picture items and such, Littleton has the various street classifications that we're looking at. Is there gonna be, a thought of like creating a new classification for school zones or something that is gonna allow a higher emphasis on safety or something among that thing to provide guidance to existing and new development in the city?
I think that's a great idea. That's certainly something we could talk about when we go to the update. What we did in 2019 when we created the transportation master plan is we didn't want to go with just the typical classifications that everybody uses because we felt like Littleton has so many unique types of roadways and how we use them and how we want to look at them moving forward in the future, that we wanted to give them their own classifications and give some detailed descriptions of what our expectations are of those type of roadways. We never said, this is the limit of how many of those we could have or anything like that. That was just our first attempt. So I think that, Derek, that's a great idea. I think that's something we should really look into because as we look to redo downtown also, there might be some tie between those two of areas that we want to call safety zones or slow zones or something like that, that we give a different classification that kind of allows us at a municipal level to invoke different conditions on those sections then. I just sent to our group, I was on a bike ride in South Denver the other day and I saw right by Bear Valley Park, they have a safety zone. Never really seen that before, but it allowed for double fines in a safety zone. And I know a lot of people have had concern, we've talked about Runyon and moving flashers and stuff. Is there another level that isn't school zones, let's separate it from that, but areas that we're really concerned about where we have a lot of people, kids walking stuff, that maybe we want to create a safety zone and we need to determine what that is. So I've kind of challenged our group to kind of figure out how did they come up with that safety plan and stuff like that for those zones? What are the criteria to classify it as that? And how do you get to the point where you're able to enforce double fines on that? So there's things like that we're going to continue to look at. I mean, we never want to say, to Matt's point, we should be looking at what other people are doing, good and bad, right? Because you can learn a lot from what other people do. That's why we talk to other municipalities around us and stuff. And that's why for a lot of these studies, we always put in one of the tasks for consultants is do some research on what is happening around the country on this particular issue. Because we want to know what is the latest, what are some innovative things that people are doing that maybe we could consider doing here. Or what have people done before that didn't work, so we don't waste our time trying to go down that road either. No, we are very open to any ideas like that for sure, so. I love that.
I think that classification system is kind of at the heart of, you know, like, and especially if it dives more deeply into, like you were saying earlier, like, they don't necessarily now say like, those sidewalks have to be this width or things like that. So if we could say that these are the road classifications, this is the infrastructure that is expected in these type of roads. And then that informs engineering docs. And if a new development comes and is building it, then it's very clear what they have to build. That would be a fantastic outcome, I think.
So the TMP right now kind of talks about what type of modes and uses is expected on the different classifications. And the other thing I left out, the reason they weren't tied like other typical, what we call local or residential and collector and arterial, those are very broad. We wanted to get into also, what is the land use around it? And how could that change and affect what type of transportation is occurring on that too? So we didn't go with things like arterial, but more like, is it a commercial corridor or is it more of a neighborhood type of a corridor? So that could kind of direct of what kind of sidewalk widths and stuff we want. As a part of our Littleton engineering design standards that we've been developing for like 9 years, one of the key aspects of that was cross sections, right? What should a good cross section look like for each of these type of classifications of roadway? And we did have a consultant kind of come and help us lay that out. So we do have some that kind of talk to what should the sidewalk width be along this type of a road, you know, this classification of roadway? When should we have bike lanes in the street versus protected versus out of the street as a cycle track? But I still think those can be developed even further as a part of the TMP update. Because again, we just scratched the surface the first time we did that. I think there's a lot more prescriptive stuff we can put in there next time around, to your point, Matt.
Is there a plan? Is there a not time allotted right now for us to look at the TMP again, or is it up in the air right now? Because it will require money for us to look at it, right? Because you have consultants that actually write it and do the revisions.
Currently, the budget for it is identified for 2026. We were hoping to do it sooner, but we can only budget so many things every year. It's the issue. So that's why we're trying to do these other things that kind of will also give us more information when we do that update of things we should be including in it, right? A lot of these corridor studies and stuff that we're doing will allow us to put things specific in the TMP that we go, oh, this worked really well here. Let's apply this citywide or to these type of roadways citywide or something like that. So while we're not necessarily doing the update right now, we're doing a lot of stuff that's going to work its way into that update.
That makes a lot of sense. If those corridor studies could be incorporated in there, I mean, it gets us a lot closer to being able to look at it systemically and, you know, to some of the comments we've had earlier, to really have a plan for how that fits together. It ain't gonna be land use and everything else that might be the ideal state. But certainly having that, those corridor studies done will give us a lot more of a systems look at it.
Yeah, and I think the job that Shane did on Broadway corridors is a perfect example of how we were taking things that were in the original TMP, but we were also taking in consideration economics and land use of that corridor. When we and other municipalities see the possibilities of Broadway, and let's not just plan for what's there now, but what could be there in the future, and let's build towards that, right? And that's why we ended up with alternatives that talked about having wider sidewalks and separate areas for bikes and stuff, because when we started first looking at it, frankly, our thought was, it's never gonna work on Broadway. We're gonna have to look at parallel routes and stuff. Well, through all that public engagement and stuff, we heard a real strong desire to get those uses on Broadway, not just near Broadway. And that's a perfect example of how public engagement and going through the process fed into what the preferred alternative was. And it wasn't even the same in every jurisdiction, right? It's a little different what Englewood and what Denver is looking for versus what us and Centennial and Douglas County are looking for on Broadway. But you still have to have some sort of consistency of how it's all gonna work together, right? So there's ability to have an overall alternative that supports the interests of each while still having a consistent vision and operation.
And looking at it as a true corridor, you know, like not just individual isolated, areas, but this is a main thoroughfare.
You don't wanna go island hopping?
No, yes. So is it possible that we could move up the TMP, or we don't think that that is practical because of the corridor studies? Or what are your all's thoughts as staff as to when it would be best to look at?
You just said it's a budget issue.
I mean,
What is the budget line? I mean, roughly, what is the budget for updating the TMP?
I think it was between 250 and 500,000 that we were anticipating, which.
Someone write a check, let's do that.
But it's not just budget, it's also time and our availability to work on, because the first time we did the TMP, it got really squished down to a really quick process of only 9 months. And we had identified, we thought it would take 1.5 years. So we literally had to cut that time in half to get that done on the schedule that everyone wanted at the time. I don't want to always be in this situation where we're rushing to get things done. We want to be able to take the time to really study it appropriately and collect that public input through the process. Because when you cut schedules down, it really limits how many times you can go out to the public and talk to them, right? So that was one lesson learned, I thought, that came out of that. But, you know, I think the other side of it is we have gone after a lot of grants and stuff already that we've been successful with, and that we now need to, you know, follow through on those and actually complete those studies, designs, the construction for those. So it's a combination of the two, the budget when it's being identified and our staff time to be able to get to it. So, I mean, ideally, I would have wanted to do it this year, frankly, in 2024. That was the 5-year time frame. That's how we originally set it up. I think Safer Streets Littleton kind of took over priority this year. Good or bad? I mean, you can look at it either way. Yes, we pushed off the update to the transportation master plan, but look at all the other good work that we're having the opportunity to do because of Safer Streets Littleton. So there's always that trade-off when you're a small city like we are.
I think Safer Streets Littleton framed the focus pretty well for that next iteration of it as well.
Yeah.
Do we have any connections with any people on council to chat about the TMP timeline?
Unfortunately, no.
I guess I want to, the whisper campaign that I've heard is the focus on Safer Streets Littleton was really challenging for folks to do because it was a real pivot for staff. And I'm really grateful that happened. And so I want to, and I feel like that reflected kind of what the council was interested in. And so I want us, whatever we talk about the TMP, I'm very grateful that you guys made that pivot because I think it was hard and I think it was really valuable to kind of do. So, but I'm happy to, I actually, while we were talking, sent a note to the city manager. I'll meet with him. I meet with him every other week. And I said, I want to talk to you about the TMP. But, you know, you just made the case, Aaron, to not do it next year, in my mind. And quite frankly, I need to be respectful. I try to be respectful. I don't always do it, of the cases that you guys make. So.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. I would have wanted to do it this year, but in light of how we did pivot and we have Safer Streets Littleton, I think that carrying it through next year and really advancing Safer Streets Littleton and getting the community involved will make the update to the TMP that much better and that much easier to get more stuff in that we really want to about active transportation.
If we have another year of going through down Safer Streets Littleton, I'd be really excited to see what the TMP update in 2026 looks like too.
Exactly, because we're doing the homework right now.
Yeah.
Just to, not to be a nitpicker, but just to be clear, if you say we're starting in 2026, I heard you say 18 months for the first one, and I understand that this is a revision, so maybe it's not as much, but it's a big revision.
That's
So we're realistically talking about 2027 before this thing is done.
I would like to, if it allows us to, I want to start right away in 2026 and do it for the entire year. That's ideally how I see it, so that it could be done in 2026 calendar year. I think we can do it in 1 year because it is an update. But again, I think it's a big update. I think there's a lot of structure that's going to change to the TMP and how we look at it.
So I'm just trying to, this.
Set expectations.
Setting expectations. You might try to start like setting expectations, probably talking June, July of 2027, not 2026.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because we also talked, as you presented to city council, adding in more of that safety action plan element to the TMP, which is currently not in there. Really making the active transportation section much more robust. So I do think budget and timeline will be expanded than just a typical update to the transportation master plan with those new elements too, so.
Mentioning the safety action plan, is that gonna be something that's gonna be worked into Safer Streets for Littleton? Or is it gonna be a separate task before the TMP update or after the TMP update?
It would be included within the TMP update. That was our current plan. Things can change obviously, but.
We think that makes the most sense because how we presented it and stuff before, it is a holistic approach, right? And I know we use that word a lot and you guys are probably sick of hearing it, but it's the way that we, thoughtfully work with other departments, other stakeholders, in the city and stuff, whether it be Littleton Public Schools or South Suburban or South Metro Housing Options, all those type of stakeholders that we want to make sure are involved and stuff. And I think what it's gonna allow us to do is roll right into implementation of those safety things if we do it as a part of the overall plan for the city. So I think there's a lot of things about that make sense because there's a lot of overlap, right, between what we're trying to do in general in the city and that safety plan. So they're not separate by any means. And I think that's the message that we're trying to get out to the community in whole that we've not been very good at in general in the past, which is every time we do a project, we're thinking about safety, we're thinking about mobility. Those things are a part of every project we do here. And does it always show up in the project? No, because sometimes we have to take stuff out because of budget or timeframes and stuff. But it is always a thought. And if we can't get it in that project, then we think, okay, what's the next one we can get into? How can we tie this all together? But yeah, I think what actually putting the safety plan together will allow us to do is kind of really prioritize what are we doing and where. And that's kind of what the TMP is meant for, right? Is to set those priorities and give us some guidance.
And yet it's not bricks and mortar, and the more we spend on talking about it, the less there is for doing it. So I think that, if we have some really clearly identified needs, priority ought to be on meeting those with today's dollars rather than planning for.
You think things are gonna get more expensive over time, Tom? That never happens.
Once maybe, but so.
We chatted about this after the meeting on Tuesday, if I remember correctly, when it was, but I do think that it could be really good for Littleton to release these are all the projects that we are doing, for pedestrian, like for Safer Streets Littleton, in essence, like put these into that bucket of like the A-tip. Am I saying that correctly? Okay.
Have you been to the Safer Streets website?
So they're all, okay, let me pull it up.
No, we'll look at it together. Matt and I are gonna look at
But
it.
is there a better format? Like we've talked about how we have a dashboard that we haven't updated like in a while, but it's an internal facing dashboard. Would it be a map typing like thing that shows you where they all are? Be something instead of a list is what you're looking, or
Yeah.
we definitely.
I can say a map, like a GIS type product, is an excellent tool to move back to the public and anybody else of interest.
I also think it could be really good. We chatted about this briefly, but I think it'd be really good to, like, for a dashboard to say, this is where we want to go and this is where we currently are. Like 14 miles of bike lanes are in the 2019 TMP. We currently have 0. And to just own it and put it up there, because then as you all start to make progress against those, we can point to it and say, we're making progress. So like, that's like the report card of where we're at now. And
Well,
then
it's not 0.
it is definitely 0 for.
So we don't have a single bike lane in the city?
Protected.
Oh, yeah, no, paint is not a bike lane.
A protected bike.
Yeah.
So how protected does it have to be? I mean, does Mary Carter count?
I would say that's a trail. Yeah, not a road.
Right, so I guess we have to define our terms before we know what we're,
We only can maintain and have ownership over roadways, so
South Suburban.
South Suburban has the other, so we don't get any credit for that.
we don't do trails.
And,
So we don't talk.
So where is the big master list? Cause
Well, so this is just the Safer Streets website that talks about all the different,
There's a map.
yeah.
There's a pilot project map.
Look, there's Phillips. I now see where Phillips is. It's over by over 13th.
I think, maybe this is
I
not.
hope that's not a prioritized list.
Maybe this is not what was meant with the original, but for me, this is, I mean, it's great to have, but that's not, like, there's so much more going on in the city. And I think there's that,
Well, there's the big things, Littleton. Also, that lists all the public works projects and stuff that are ongoing, but we struggle with keeping that up to date as well. And it's not done nearly enough. But again, it's who's doing it, right? How often do you update it? What's the critical information to convey to people?
Tell David Gilbert it's his job and.
I would also say, and I think I've heard Pam say this before, and I agree with her on this, that we don't need more documents. We need to consolidate and streamline documents, as well. So like the TMP, like Envision Littleton and the TMP are probably where the vision is set. Is that accurate for?
Yes.
Yeah, so Envision Littleton is like, what do we want Littleton to be? And then the TMP of specifically transportation as part of that. So
It's like the
yeah.
community development has their comp plan, right? That they
Yeah.
update at the same time, and that's their community development type of a vision and stuff.
Yeah.
And ULI speaks to land use. All.
And there is no one way that you can communicate anything and everyone in the city will see it and.
And the more of those things you have, the more time you spend doing nothing but the updates.
Yeah, that's
Then
true.
you don't have time to do the real work. So there's a balance, but I think anything you can do, to your point, Matt, I think that helps to give us a sense of accountability and progress. And I hope it makes your job easier because people begin to feel like, hey, stuff's really happening. And when we see things change, let's take credit for it, because I do think that encourages us to feel like there was a delivery on a promise made.
Yeah, and I would love it if staff, like, I think a lot of times organizations are hesitant to do that because they're like, we did a lot of things and this is not reflective of that, and so I would love it if you all separated, like, in citizens separated, like, if we make this report card now, this is backwards facing, what have people done before? But like, it's to start the baseline, of what we're improving moving forward, and so that, I would love that if we gave like a really honest look at the city and said, this is our current state of the city for the ideals listed in the TMP and what will be in the new TMP. And then this is the progress that we're making against that.
We had a,
Get to the other things.
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
yeah, I will say we did do a report on progress for the TMP was that last year?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah,
And we do feel like it's time to update that as kind of, like you were saying, a report card for that.
One last comment. I think it's also incumbent on all of us in the room,
Yeah, this
in
was-
particular, to be spokesmen.
Yes.
And I had that, we did a Stern Park cleanup,
Transportation of
and
I think.
talking to my neighbors, and they had no clue what that Lake and Stern Parkway thing was all about. They thought it was a total waste of time and money and effort. I said, really?
I love it.
Let me talk to you about that.
I feel
And
very
we,
safe.
went through it, and they went, wow, okay. So yeah, we just have to engage.
No, that's a great point. Hey, let's keep moving on. Are we ready to hit the fiber projects?
Whenever you are.
I am. No, we've got about 40 minutes if, cause I do want to respect everybody's time. Thank you. And get us out of here at 8:30. But tell us about this because I think this could wind up being foundational for some improvements that come.
For sure. What was sent out was intended less as a presentation and more just kind of like give you kind of information in general. So we didn't want to sit here and just present fiber 2 because frankly, it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
But it does have a lot to it that's kind of behind the scenes, underground, literally, that allows us to do that we couldn't otherwise. So I know we presented the fiber master plan a long time ago, and that was developed in 2019-ish also. And the whole point behind it was, you know, the communication system we have that we're currently using pre-fiber has limitations, right? There's a lot of different limitations to it, and not only in being able to convey data because it's via radio, but also how secure and how safe all that information is that's out there, and the ability to share it with other departments. So what fiber allows us to do is not only get to our infrastructure, but allow our IT department to convey data between buildings and between municipalities, to share communications with other municipalities like Arapahoe County and Centennial and stuff, and Englewood are, you know, our partners. And, you know, the vision in the future of how we use fiber is we are putting in enough that it's not just for the city to use, but for others to use eventually if they need it also. And we haven't even broached that side of, are we rent it out? Are we gonna loan it out? How are we gonna do that? We'll get to there eventually, but first we need to build the system so it's there to even be used. So the fiber plan was put together for someone to come in and kind of tell us who knew something about fiber, what is the best way to do this? You know, we're starting basically at zero. It's not really zero because we share a lot of what CDOT has along Santa Fe, but city-owned fiber, it was pretty much at zero. So we're like, where do you even start, right? And so they kind of helped us put a plan together based on talking to us and our needs from different departments. Okay, here's how you build it out, right? But even then, you don't necessarily follow, okay, here is priority one, let's do that one first, because it has to do more with where can you get the money to even build it and stuff too. So Broadway is where we started first because it was the highest priority that was on a roadway system where we could go after grant funding. Because state and federal grants are usually restricted to regional roadway systems. They being Big Brother, right? The state and federal assume that smaller streets and stuff within a city are our responsibility and we'll take care of them. They want to help when it's a roadway that has regional significance. So it's people not only in our city, but others are using that roadway to get between. So that's why Broadway ended up becoming the focus first, because it was that regional roadway system. We had a lot of other stuff going on. We could find funding for it. So what we first installed was that section basically from Powers down to Arapahoe Road. That allowed us to get quite a few signals that are tied in there also, but also it kind of set the standard at the north end. If we were to connect with Englewood someday, now we're right near that border and we can do that. It allowed us to get to Arapahoe Road, which was clear.
Laser planner?
Oh, no. Thank you. It allowed us to get to Arapahoe Road, which is where Centennial has their system coming in and Arapahoe County does. So we're able to tie into that. And you know, what we're doing on our own right now is Littleton Boulevard, because that's not considered a regional roadway system, but that ties Broadway back to basically this building, right? Gets us back to where all our offices are and stuff, and Arapahoe Counties, which is right across the street for their county building. So that's what we're working on right now, is putting fiber along Littleton Boulevard. We're almost done with that design. And then we have some funding for it, but of course, to your point before, Tom, when we started working on it, prices were X, and now they're 2X, right? Or whatever, they, you know, everything goes up. So we're still, while we're finishing the design, trying to figure out how we're gonna pay for this to get it in the ground. Another good reason to team up with other municipalities, right? Because then you can share in those costs and stuff as well.
I have a question about like some of the overall plans. Is the fiber network put in just city focused fiber? Is it something that other people can use and utilize, kind of almost like a fiber highway or like a electronics highway of sorts?
I would say yes and no. The thought is we're putting in enough, we're putting in 432 strands so that there's plenty out there to utilize however we need to in the future. Let's say the city decides, like Centennial did, to get fiber to every home. Well, now with that backbone of 432, we could actually do that. in the future. So that's why we had a lot of conversations before we started any of this with other municipalities that are way further advanced than us. Fortunately, we have Centennial right next door, who is one of those cities that's really well advanced in fiber and done a lot of research and developed things over time. So they've been kind of our guiding mentor of telling us things like, we were gonna put in 96 strands to start with, and we're like, oh, for a couple more dollars, you go up to 132 and you're covered forever. So it's things like that we didn't know, right, before, that we're learning from others. So we don't have it all worked out how to share it, but we're trying to put in as much there as a base so that it can cover us for whatever we need moving forward for the next 50 years, hopefully.
How much money are we talking?
To install fiber,
Yeah.
well, it's not cheap.
What's the rate per mile or whatever?
Yeah, Broadway, so Broadway was about 1.5 miles, the section we did, and it cost a little under $1 million.
Okay,
That's cheaper than I thought, actually.
yeah, no, that's fine. Million.
But we already had,
Deal of a deal.
except we already had conduit in the ground there. Because when fiber companies come through our town and want to put fiber in, we make them get an empty conduit right next to it for us to put fiber in the future. And all we have to pay for is the materials. They are responsible for putting it in. So that, in that case, that was another one I left out. It was an opportunity because we already had all the conduit underground. The next section we're taking on from Arapahoe down to C470 on Broadway, we have no existing conduit. So, but we got a grant for that one. And it was a much more sizable grant. Instead of $750,000 to do 1.5 miles, we put in for $3 million, right? To do, I think, about 2.5 miles. But we're also trying to spread out on the mineral and county line with that fiber as well. So again, it's all about opportunity, right? We try and look at every project we do and go, how far can we spread the peanut butter to get as much out of this as possible?
Are we putting an extra conduit in there? So that we can go the other way? When the fiber company wants to be like, we can rent it to you or we can sell it.
$1 million a mile.
Like,
The hole's already dug.
It's a good question, Jeff. We had not talked about that yet, but we haven't started the design for that project either. That is something we could consider. Talk to the consultant we hire and go, how much more would that add to the project if we were to put in an extra
or
conduit?
even reach out to other fiber companies, say like, are you interested in going in this stretch and sharing the cost with us? And
They usually will not share any kind of information with us because they don't want it to be, it's all proprietary, right? Where they're going, what they're thinking about. They don't want other companies to know what they're doing. So as soon as they start sharing stuff with the city, most of everything we do is public accessible. So not many will want to talk to us. They only want to talk to us when they want to put something in, not when we want to put something in.
And this will make it so you can have synchronized lights and everything like that. Is that right?
Well, it goes way beyond that. So another part of it, when we put in fiber, we also upgrade all the other equipment at a signal. So a lot of our equipment is very old and we've been prioritizing that also to get to where we have controllers that allow us to do a lot more flexibility with things, with signal timing, with like things we've talked about before, with leading pedestrian intervals, things like that, that we just couldn't do with our other controllers. They didn't have that capability. So one part of it is upgrading that equipment. Another is connecting the fiber. Fiber also allows us, because it's underground and because you make it in a loop, that's the goal, is to create a whole loop. That way you can get either way on it to everything. So if someone comes in and cuts that loop over here, we can still go the long way around and connect everything together. That's the other nice thing about fiber. What we're using right now with, radio communication, it's line of sight. And it's funny, trees keep growing. And you'd be amazed how many, all of a sudden, we don't have communication. We're like, what happened? And we'll go out there and go, oh, yeah, that's why these trees have grown. And now it was enough that it blocked your line of sight and you can't get in. So that's the other thing is, we don't want to have to keep going and cutting down trees just for line of sight with communication. So that's another smaller aspect of it. But yeah, it gives a lot of flexibility. We can send a lot more data along that fiber than we can with anything else, both video images and also data for our IT department and stuff to share between buildings. So it's kind of a win for everybody, not just us. But it does allow us to connect all of our signals. And we're also working with all the adjacent municipalities to connect with them too. Because ideally, eventually, we want to have a transportation management system throughout Arapahoe County so that we can help each other out. and possibly share resources so that we're not all having to do everything individually. So that's the kind of behind the scenes discussions we have within this Arapahoe County Fiber Coalition that we're a part of. Is talking about what is everybody doing? How do we share, if we have overlapping corridors that we're both interested in, how do we share those funds and stuff? But then also, how do we share data eventually too, so that if there's a problem on one major road and it's gonna send a bunch of traffic to another major road, there's a way for us to convey that to other municipalities. Because as we've talked about before too, most people don't know, are they in Littleton now? Are they in Centennial, in Englewood? What road are they on at this point? They don't care. They just want to be able to get, whether they're driving, walking, or biking, how do I get from here to there, right? As quickly as possible or as safely as possible.
Yeah, and here's our application map, or the map for our application for the second phase of Broadway. And so you can see all those little icons represent a piece of equipment that's upgraded to each of those signals. And then also, like, Aaron was mentioning about connecting with other jurisdictions. We talked to both CDOT and Douglas County when we were preparing the application, saying, hey, are you guys open to partnering with us and connecting this fiber so that our systems can be connected once we actually put this in the ground? And both said they were open to talking about it, so, which is better than a straight up no.
That's good, because the road doesn't end at county line. Or at Powers or.
Well, CDOT does have quite a backbone of fiber. It goes along C-470, it goes along Santa Fe. We're trying to take advantage of that. But CDOT's at the point now where they're like, they don't just give it out for free anymore, like they used to a long time ago. Now it's, what are you doing for us? So like Shane said, that's why we're having those conversations early, because we're like, we want to connect with you so that now if you want to, you can see all of our cameras and stuff, that some are on your roadway system, some aren't. And CDOT's been focusing a lot, you probably didn't hear about this, but when C-470, that project went in, one big piece of it, aside from the construction itself, was talking about incident management. And how can they, all of us that are along C-470, more effectively help each other to respond to incidents, to move them out of the roadway so that we can get back to free flowing conditions and stuff again. And that was a big effort that none of us were even a part of. Discussions about that. And fiber comes into that too, because of how you can communicate and see that there's an incident on a roadway and stuff too, and get that to the right people. So when I talk about putting fiber in the ground too, that doesn't get just shared with IT, it gets shared with our police dispatch, thank you, right next door here also, so that they can be aware of an incident and get police out there or fire that much quickly when something happens. So it's about that also, and having access for them to more cameras around our city to see if something's going on that they need to respond to.
So Aaron, you talked about that interface to the cameras. Will this also enable at some point us to be able to tie in so that you can see the number of cell signals that are being congregating along given pathways and even, I mean, there's probably a GPS tie-in to be able to see how fast those signals are moving. And I mean, I know that's out there. I don't know how far away, but is this going to be an enabler for that?
Most definitely. And one of those pieces of equipment that was one of the icons up there is something called a cyclica that we've been putting on different corridors. It's basically a box that goes on our controllers that allows us to track anonymously someone that goes by with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or something like that, and it can track them it assigns a really long, like 20-digit whatever number or whatever to that vehicle at that time or that person, and then it'll go, okay, it took them this long to get through the corridor. And over time, as we expand that across the city, it'll give us the ability to go, hey, all of a sudden, should take 5 minutes, it's taking every 20 minutes on this corridor. You could start giving us alerts and stuff like that so that we can look at things quicker. And again, get it, if there's an incident or something, get that to dispatch and the police to get out there to respond. So yeah, ultimately what we'd like to get to is the ability to tie that to information sources, real time to people.
So if you identified my Bluetooth and I went from County Line Road to Powers in 30 seconds, would that be,
They're gonna send
is that enforceable? Yeah, that's what I'm
It
wondering.
isn't right now, but that certainly could be something in the future if the police wanted to take that on.
Yeah, we're still struggling with photo radar at this point, so.
That's how it was in when I rented my car in Australia, they said, do not speed. They have cameras on the overpasses and it's a math question and they'll send you a ticket if you went faster than what is possible. And they said it's all automated. There's no,
I'm from America, the laws of physics don't apply to me.
at 30 seconds, they would be like, this is junk data, something went wrong. But yes.
And I think the point is that like the data is all anonymized right now.
Yeah.
And so like we have these travel time monitors on Santa Fe. And so like I get a text to my phone if like the travel times on Santa Fe are outside of a normal range, but it doesn't tell me like, Robert was going 67 on Santa Fe today. You better go talk to him.
Gotcha.
Right? Just says that, hey, like we're seeing consistently, it's taking extra time to go from point A to point B. So you need to know that something is going on. Could be a crash, could be something else. So.
It sounds like we could use this potentially to say, like, from a enforcement and speeding, like, say 35% of the people who go through this corridor are 5 to 10 miles an hour above the speed limit.
Well, and awareness is the first step
It
in
doesn't
that.
have to be Robert, but just saying
Yeah.
that we have a large percentage of the people on this road that go very fast.
Right.
And because you agree to the user terms on your phone, we already have that data through Urban SDK. Placer AI, so like what we've been doing actually monthly, we had a meeting this morning where what we do is every month when we get the data from the previous month, we look at streets where, hey, the 85th percentile speed here according to cell phone data is like 15 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. So again, it's anonymized, so we don't know who it is, but that allows us to be a little more proactive and then go out and see, okay. And sometimes it's a blip in the data, like we will regularly have like a street that's, 200 feet long and it says the 85th percentile speed's 120 miles an hour. I'm like, I don't think so. Nobody on this, nobody's driving a top fuel dragster up and down the street. But when we have a large set of data, and we can kind of see that, then we can go with into field counts and so.
Yeah, and a lot of this is getting, to Matt's point before about getting base, right? Getting base data collection so that years later, you will have that to do something with, whether it's to support making changes to that roadway, because we have the data that we can show, we're going after grants, sometimes it's beneficial for that. There's a lot of different.
Well, and you can really find out whether what you've done has helped, if you try to do something that's gonna lower speeds.
Yeah.
Here's some data you can get your hands on that really shows whether it's working. We got 20 minutes left. Do we have time to do the last topic on the agenda tonight?
Scroll
To us, right?
Yeah.
Should we?
Can we hang for another? I mean, I don't know unless there was anything else on that, but I thought that was pretty good coverage on fibers. Appreciate that. We did.
It's plenty for me.
Yeah, we dug in. We got more than I thought we would. I did not. Yeah, so this is our last, our last item.
Am I presenting this too?
I don't know.
I can do it.
I can give it a try.
Let Kenna, she'll present.
Buy your lunch.
Whoever does it gets a piece of chocolate.
There we go. I'm joking. I'm happy to present this. And Aaron, obviously, you can join in. So this was actually a presentation that we modified a bit. We presented this to the South Platte Working Group, which meets, it's a coalition of cities and South Suburban and Arapahoe County Open Space and a bunch of people who work along or have, stake in the game along the South Platte River. So they asked us to come and present this, and we thought this would be a good presentation to give to you all, to just an update about all of the work going on around Santa Fe and Mineral. Because we have a lot of work going on, so. Yeah, we have 4 main projects that we'll dive into.
Sorry, there's a lag.
No, you're fine. So this is a projects map that just shows all of the different work. So this includes all of the development that's going on. So at the top, there's the Aspen Grove redevelopment, right? We have the RTV Park and Ride, and we have our Mineral Station West improvements project happening around the Mineral Light Rail Station there on the west side. And then we have our Mineral Mobility East project on the east side of Mineral of Santa Fe. You can see all of the Santa Fe Park development areas there. So there's 3 different sites. There's the Toll Brothers, Evergreen, and then the Zocalo site.
Which is no longer Zocalo, it's over right now.
Oh, okay.
They backed out of the deal, so now that's the Littleton Equine Medical Center. That's labeled as the local site. It was a developer that was gonna buy it. They backed out. But, LEMC is still planning on selling because they're building a new facility that's bigger and better in Parker. So, I just talked to them the other day and they're putting together, they have other interested parties, so we'll see. Something else will.
Yeah, that's for grabs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
land.
anyone in this room?
I'm interested.
Get your checkbook out.
Yeah.
How many acres is that particular site, do you know?
I would say it was about 10.
Yeah, and there might be a slide in there.
I'm friends with one of the owners.
All of that to say is that there's going to be over 1,800 new units in this area over the next 10 years. So we have multiple grant funded projects. And we've really focused on how to create better bicycle and pedestrian connections to the light rail station and to the Mary Carter Greenway. There's also the Douglas County White, sorry, Shane, I'm sorry.
On pause.
Yeah, so just other things to note is the, Platte River Parkway extension through all of those new developments. That's the blue dash line there. That will include, a white sidewalk and a future cycle track, that's behind the curb. We just applied for a grant and were successful to do design of a Santa Fe Drive regional trail connection. That's kind of the one missing piece, that's not being designed either by developers or by Douglas County, which is doing their ongoing widening project on Santa Fe. And so they've added sidewalk and trail connections to the C470 trail and then sidewalk on Santa Fe to County Line. And so then this regional trail connection project would be that blue arrow right there, which is connecting to County Line to the Platte River Parkway extension.
That would be huge. So is that pink on crossing C470 north south? Is that going to be on over the bridge? Cause they're doing the underpass.
It is on the bridge already, the new bridge.
Okay, they're widening it and making it safe.
Yeah, and they have the underpass, like you said. So they're actually extending some trail along Santa Fe to the south of C472 that will connect to that underpass to the C470 trail and then come across and come up to County Line, like Kenna just said. And so we're trying to take that the next step and be able to get people from Douglas County all the way up to the light rail station, to Aspen Grove, to Carson Nature Center, to the Mary Carter Greenway, all of that. And then also, yeah,
I think
all on
fantastic, yeah.
shared use path or cycle path.
Yeah, so that's the goal is that, you know, if you're coming from Douglas County or you're around here, you could have a safe off-road path all the way up through here to the light rail station or Aspen Grove.
Nice.
And then go either way on the Mineral Trail if you'd like to also to connect to other trails like the Columbine Trail along Platte Canyon Road or, or the Mary Carter Greenway or Lee Gulch, all of that. We're trying to look at that network. And again, we're trying not to just focus on Littleton, but how do we connect outside of Littleton too, right? That's, you know, we've talked about the County Line project before that we're doing a shared use path along County Line from Broadway to connect to the C470 and Highline Canal Trail. Again, that's not even in the city of Littleton, most of that, it's in Douglas County, but we see that as a benefit to Littleton citizens to be able to connect them to the regional trail system.
Yeah.
All right.
Next slide.
Not
yet. Yeah, go back.
So Santa Fe Drive and Mineral Avenue intersection improvements. So this is the famous quad road, which you can direct all of those questions to Aaron.
I don't know anything.
So as part of the Platte River Parkway extension, we will have a behind the curb cycle track. This is an old graphic, so I don't know if it is 9 feet or if it ended up being 10 feet.
It, yeah, that's close enough.
It's close enough, yeah. Almost 10 feet of a two-way cycle track. There will be a 1 foot buffer.
Area,
Yeah. And then sidewalk. And then there will be a landscape buffer between the actual roadway and these amenities along that Platte River Parkway.
Fantastic.
And there's more to this too. It's not only are we putting a cycle track outside the roadway, but we're also prioritizing that cycle track and sidewalk when it crosses a driveway, for instance. Typically what we'll do is you look around the city, you know, ramp down, go across the driveway, ramp back up. We're not doing that with any of this. It's staying at the same level and people on the driveway will go up and over that instead. Because we want to
huge.
Yeah.
And you're telling the car, you are entering a different area, like behave differently when you go up on this, which is
Safe zone.
so fantastic, yeah.
And we'll also have signs on the adjacent roadway, Platte River Parkway, so if anyone's turning, to tell them to watch for that cycle track too, so that they know there's a two-way facility running parallel.
Yeah.
This is being currently built, construction advertisement in fall. Remind me what construction advertisement means.
So that means that we hire a contractor to actually start the construction work. So we are at 100% design on this project. We are currently trying to get what CDOT calls clearances. So there's different clearances you have to get to be able to go to construction. You have to have an environmental clearance, which says you've looked at the environment in the area and you've addressed anything that needs to be addressed at the federal level. There's a utility clearance, which means you've gone and talked to any utility company that could be in this area, make sure that you're coordinating with them and allowing them time to relocate facilities if they need to get out of your way and stuff. And the third one is a right-of-way clearance. So in this case, we had to obtain property from Evergreen to build the quad road through their property. We also needed right-of-way from RTE because we're doing some work along the light rail station as well. And then also the 7-Eleven, which is on the corner of Platte River Parkway and Mineral, we were expanding the trail and doing the connection at the intersection there, so we needed some property from them. So we're working through all that. So we're really close to getting all those clearances. We expect to be going to add, which is where we advertise it for anyone to bid on. Hopefully yet in 2026, but there's still some thing, 26, I don't know.
Yeah, I was like,
Sorry,
Yeah.
2024. Yeah, it's been a long week. So that we can start to construct early in 2025. We think it's about an 18 to 22 month construction timeframe. So it would be done by the summer of 2026, is our thought. The cycle tracks themselves, we've actually put that responsibility on the developers, because as they build those blocks and there's gonna be people there that wanna use them, we're making them build them at the same time. So that's not gonna be built as a part of the quad road project, but those two developments, Evergreen and Toll Brothers, are under construction now also. Toll Brothers is further ahead, so they're building all their infrastructure now, which will include the cycle track and sidewalks before they can start occupying it. Evergreen will have to do the same thing. Before they can get certificates of occupancy for people in their facilities, they have to have built the whole infrastructure that we've agreed upon. So.
this is current.
Yeah, this is the Toll Brothers site, so the red arrow up there is Santa Fe and Mineral.
I'd actually say this is a little old. When was this from, like?
August.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if you really wanna see what's going on at Toll Brothers, I suggest you go up on county line to South Park Circle. That's kind of goes, that's just east of Santa Fe there, if you've ever seen that. And if you go up to the top of it, you kind of have a view that kind of looks down on all the construction that's happening there. Yeah, they've built the roadway Phillips that we're calling it, that comes out to Santa Fe. The only part they haven't built is the connection to Santa Fe, because they have to get a construction permit from CDOT first before they can make that connection. But yeah, they're currently building their whole infrastructure, because that has to be in place before they can occupy.
City's first roundabout.
Yeah, you can see it's actually built there. That's an actual roundabout, not a traffic circle.
That's fantastic.
That is a roundabout, and it'll be the first one in the city of Littleton, which is, in my opinion, a little ridiculous that we're this far behind with roundabouts. There'll also be another one up at the Nichols and Platte River intersection, which is, yeah, right there, part of the quad road. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff that's happening as part of this project. And, you know, when we talk about Littleton in general, you know, I know a lot of frustrations you've heard from us because our system is so old and stuff. It's hard to just go and put something new in, right? You have to have enough space, enough right of way to do that. Well, we had an area out here where we did have enough space, right? So we're trying to do it and design it the best we can so that we have the best facilities out there.
For those roundabouts, will that be the bike in the roundabout or the bike outside
No, the
separate?
bike will go outside. It'll have its own crossing separate from the roundabout.
This is good.
Right.
Trying to tell you guys, we've been doing stuff.
Haven't gone to construction yet. We're so close on so many projects.
We're thinking
Well,
about. so
that's why you
many
need to do the
things.
baseline right now so that you get credit for these next things that hit.
You're not. So Mineral Mobility East, this is another, they're all grant funded projects, in this area. So this was a TIP grant. Santa Fe and Mineral had 2 TIP grants as to Timbercliff.
This is actually, started as a safer Main Street.
Oh, you're
grant.
right, I'm sorry.
Because the cost went up so much from construction to the pandemic, we had to then go after a TIP grant to support the Safer Main Street grant, along with an Arapahoe County Open Space grant. So we now have 4 grants that are supporting this project.
All by different agencies, which is.
All with their own separate reporting requirements, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah.
So this is really looking at how to connect people on the east side of Santa Fe along Mineral to the light rail station. So there's multiple different aspects to this project. One is paving the Mineral Trail between Jackass Hill Road and the Highland Canal. Some at-grade improvements at the Highland Canal Trail. We are going to be doing an underpass feasibility study for that crossing though, starting later this year. We will be redoing the intersection of Mineral and Jackass Hill Road, and that will be a protected bicycle intersection. We will be adding buffered bike lanes that can eventually become protected bike lanes along Jackass Hill Road, and then improvements to the Highland Canal crossing of Jackass Hill Road.
These on Mineral, we're doing buffered bike lanes on Mineral too that can
Oh,
become
thank you.
protected bike lanes.
Well, maybe a year ago, I can't remember how long it was ago, but we were talking about the C curb and the ballers being like a way to test it, to see how we can maintain it, to see if we can do protected. You know, and those touch upon that. So what are your all's thoughts right now on the feasibility of that, like for winter and things?
Well, and that's what the other pilot projects that we've talked about, those 4 miles worth of protected bike lanes that we want to put in, that is intended to test out the equipment and stuff like that. Yeah, we're still trying to purchase the equipment we need to keep it cleared out and stuff, and that's been part of the delay, along with trying to obtain all the equipment to install to put in these protected bike lanes. Surprisingly, when you want to do miles worth of protected bike lane, it's a lot of equipment that you need to purchase and install. So yeah, it's been a little more challenging than we originally expected, both from a cost standpoint and just to obtain it. That much equipment at one time. But yeah, that's the point of the pilot projects, because they're not putting a curb down. They're putting something that still allows drainage to go between them and all of that. So we don't have to do those type of level of improvements that cost so much more, but is putting equipment in the way so that we do need to be able to plow it and be able to keep it clean out, where our typical equipment won't be able to fit in that area, so.
So, this is really good, and I'm gonna ask a doom and gloom question, but because I'm excited about this work and worried about kind of what are the next problems, but this stops at Windermere, and then there's like I looked at my map, and there's like a 5-block kind of dead zone, and then we get to the Lumen property, which is gonna have a bike lane. And then we're gonna have like another couple of blocks that go from Lumen to Broadway. So there's still, I mean, this is great, but there's still a little bit of an island problem. Is that right?
Correct, and that's been a long-term plan of ours, is as these pieces go in, we wanna figure out what do we need to fill in as a city to make it all connected. And that's why we're not just going in and doing protected bike lane right now for the Mineral, we're doing buffered first, because we want to make changes to the entire stretch of Mineral when we put in that protective, which will include things like reducing speed limits.
Yeah.
That's another side of it, but you have to have the whole system in place before you can do that. So Lumen really, I mean, they're building part of it, but they're only doing on their side of the street, basically. Yeah, so, but we're having them design so that as we do signals and stuff, we can see where we're placing those poles and stuff to allow us to do full protected intersections and a cycle track or protected bike lane along the north side or westbound also at the same time. So we're making sure anything they're building isn't going to keep us from doing the entire vision for Mineral, which is protected bike lanes, that whole.
Hopefully all that sales tax money from Costco is gonna help pay for the protected bike lane.
Get in line, man.
Hot dog sales.
And not for.
And I will say, I think, you know, when we started design for this project, we were a long ways out from doing protected bike lanes. And as we've discussed, like the Safer Streets Littleton project has really propelled us forward. And so I could see us, you know, in the near term, putting in protection along both Jackass Hill and Mineral, right? I think that it's coming.
One of the
Sooner rather
things,
than later.
yeah, one of the things for Jackass is obviously it becomes Prince, right? And, you know, to your point, Robert, along Mineral, yeah, it just stops. Well, we have the same thing on Jackass going to Prince, it just stops at the top of the hill. That's one of those key corridor studies we want to do, which is what do we do along Prince the whole way? What is the future of that? Is it consolidating the bike lanes into a cycle track on one side of the street the whole way? Is it keeping them separate on the two different sides? Is it protected bike lanes? Is it cycle track outside the roadway? That's what we need the corridor studies to kind of determine, how do we do all of that?
No side, I ran down the canal, up Jackass Hill, up Prince, and up Lee Gulch the other day, and there's no sidewalks on half of Prince. You know, you just have to keep proggering. You know, back
And
and
that's
forth.
the combination of how we want to be a suburb, but still have some of our rural feel, right? And a lot of that is older properties along there that never, wanted curb and gutter along their side or sidewalks. And we hear that from some neighborhoods even today. That they do not want.
And I'll add.
I want to get lifted again. I'm not gonna push that in Aberdeen.
The spotting nature of mineral, so we put in for a mineral corridor study with design, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 2019, 2020. And the grants kind of go cyclically where they do a lot of planning grants and then people get tired of just planning, so then they're heavy on construction. And we applied for a planning and construction grant when CDOT was really looking to fund construction. And so we submitted a great application like, hey, this is really great, we think it'll be awesome. Let us know when you get it funded, but you're not constructing anything, so it didn't score well, so sorry. So, yeah, so that's why even though it's not, sexy to spend money on planning and design all the time, it does set us up for when there is funding just for construction, so.
And I will note too, as we've talked about with our protected bike lanes, going to be installed this year, we're using different materials on each of those 4 locations, which might sound a little like, why would you do that? But the whole reason is that we want to test different materials and figure out, how is installation, how is maintenance, how is it holding up with plowing and all those things, so that when we do a whole corridor like mineral, we'll say, this is our city standard, this is what we're going to use.
And it's also the purpose of the surveys that are attached to them too, so we can understand, what does everyone like? What makes you feel more
What do you
safe
like?
or more protected than other materials and stuff? And what do you want to see different about these, or what can you do that would make you feel even safer? So that survey is really key too in collecting that information from people.
Can I ask the question, how are we gonna get from where the yellow line stops to the other side of Santa Fe?
RTD.
Right, so right now, it goes up and.
Yeah, I do, I go up, go across on the bridge, yeah.
Yeah.
Different stairs.
We have approached RTD many times about, we want to do a project with them through their light rail station, and they've never been open to it because we feel like the ramp going up is insufficient. We feel like the bridge crossing Santa Fe is insufficient, because in their mind, it's all about how do you get people to light rail, and we're like, that's important.
We live
But
here.
people want to get across Santa Fe to the 2 sides also, not just for light rail. And how can we jointly do that? And they're like, no, you can't encourage people to do that because this is for a light rail station. It's not set up safely for bicycles and other people to be using it. And we keep going, but they have been for 25 years. Sometimes RTD doesn't work in reality, but yeah, the problem is we can't force them to do that. We've even identified grants for them in the past, transit grants, and they keep go, great, we'll be a partner. Let us know when you need that letter of support. We're like, no, it's a transit grant. We're not a transit agency. You are. We support you. You don't support us on this one. And it's just, they've been focusing on other things. I know.
Staying alive.
Yeah, stay in an organization and stuff. But long-term, that is a gap we've identified and we want to do better of how we get across there. Shane has his other project that we haven't gotten to yet, which is on the west side, which is making improvements so that bikes don't have to use that shared ramp with ADA to get down there, but instead gets rid of those stairs that go to the south as you come across the bridge.
Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong,
I'd love to, but.
this crossing on the south side of Mineral will be better for pedestrians. Cause I mean,
Yes.
there's nothing right here on the southwest corner, but as part of all of those developments, that crossing at grade will be better. than what it
Yes,
is.
thank you, Kenna. So what she's talking
It's not a
about
solu- it's
is
not
a
the
part of
best
the,
solution, but-
is a part of both the Evergreen and Quad Road project together. There'll be not a trail, but a 10-foot wide sidewalk on the south side of Mineral also that goes from Santa Fe basically to where the bridge over the river is right now. So the path will connect to Platte River Parkway It'll also continue and go under the bridge over the Platte River, also on the east side of the river. We currently have the Mary Carter Greenway on the west side. This will go under on the east side and connect to the Mary Carter Greenway also. And we're making improvements to the intersection itself of Santa Fe and Mineral, including a raised pedestrian crossing to get out to that channelized island for the new sidewalk. Center medians with pass-throughs so that there's refuge for pedestrians and bicyclists that are crossing Santa Fe or Mineral, so things like that. And obviously, we're getting rid of the left turn, so you're not gonna have to compete with left turning vehicles anymore at that intersection as well. So you're right, I mean, there's improvements happening on the south side, also to make it easier to get through the system, but we still recognize anything we can make that's grade separated, whether it be an overpass or an underpass, is gonna be the highest level of safety and comfort for people.
Yeah, that's the long-term goal.
Hannah, thank you for that. Fantastic.
We're not done,
One more
but.
slide. Oh, there's one more slide?
Well, like, there's like 2 more slides.
Okay, all right.
We can be really fast. So this is Mineral Station West, so this is looking at how to get people, on the west side of Santa Fe, a better connection to the light rail station and the Mary Carter Greenway. So we are going to take the, southern path here. Well, I can stand up too, but it's fine. Right now there's some steps here, so we're gonna remove those steps so that it's not going to be an official bike path, but as a bicyclist, you would be able to use that. Making some improvements, those are the main improvements here, and then we are going to extend that cycle track that's on the new development south, all the way along Platte River Parkway to.
All the way up to Panera.
Yep. The Aspen Grove redevelopment is actually gonna continue that cycle track within their property. And then we are going to do some improvements on Carson Drive, to connect to the Carson Nature Center and the Mary Carter Green.
Have you chatted with Aspen Grove about not having to go, like, if you follow the red and just like go straight and not turn left, along the,
Yes.
okay, yeah.
So the red is not part of our project, but what we have talked to Aspen Grove about along the vision of how to get their mall better connected to the light rail station as well. Building some sort of trail connection. When they build that building that you see phase 1, it's gonna look totally different. So it's not gonna have its back to the light rail station anymore, it's gonna turn more and have 2 sides to it. And so people will be able to come out that side and go
Way
right
better.
to light, and that's where they're putting the residential.
Yeah.
into the new building.
And I believe they're building a platform there that would connect into the RTU lot.
Yeah.
Is that blue on the bottom that very abruptly has a 90-degree turn? Is that how it's gonna be designed?
So I think.
There'll be a path going across the grass if that's the case.
You're gonna maintain the existing sidewalk alignment, so it would, the station's up here, you go here, and then you'll have to take a 90-degree turn, unfortunately, at this driveway and connect into the existing mineral trail.
Okay.
That's a whole long story too.
That's another RTD, it's their property, we can't force.
Talk about that over drinks sometime. I need a drink to talk about. Okay, we're almost done, I promise.
Shane.
Sorry.
That's your role.
So the very last project, which I already touched on, is this connection here. So this was another Arapahoe County open space grant that we were awarded to do design. So the developers, it says Zocalo, whoever the developer is, will be responsible of Platte River Parkway comes here, and then they'll do this little L connection here. And then this is the Woolhurst mobile home park here. So this is where that gap is that we'll be designing that trail connection.
And then as a part of what phase 2 of the Santa Fe EL study looked at was this whole area and how to connect over to the Mary Carter Greenway for all these developments also. So that's separate from what we applied for here, but, oh yeah, it's kind of shown in here. Where we're looking with South Suburban about getting a new crossing over the river for all this new development, the 1,800 units that are gonna be built on this side to get them directly over to the Mary Carter Greenway. South Suburban sees that as a benefit too, because they don't want everyone destroying that east side, because they're trying to keep more preserved as natural and get everyone to the west side if they want to use the trail system on their bike or with pets and stuff like that. So that's now been coordinated with South Suburban in their Mary Carter Greenway master plan to do that work also in the future. No set date, no budget, but at least we've identified where that can occur and we'll agree upon that. So it's a good first step.
That's a ton of projects, yeah.
Good, thanks. Great job.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Tired?
Well, yeah, you're tired just watching it. I think we're a little bit over time, so rather than asking for second helpings, I suggest we adjourn and plan to get together at our next meeting. It's just that
Yeah.
Are we doing the normal one in October and okay, I just wanted to clarify it.
yeah. Get together for the tour. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So,
Go ahead. Did
No,
you
no.
have something, Robert?
no, I did not. No, look, you guys had a meeting without a report from Robert and the meeting was still went over time, so it is not my fault.
You brought that upon yourself.
Yeah, I did not cause the overtime.